The air in Blackwater Swamp hung thick with the stink of rotting cypress. Stripe, a young zebra, his ribs heaving, stripes matted with mud, kicked weakly against the ground. Around him, the python Slither, 30 feet of coiled muscle, scales black as spilled oil, squeezed tighter. Stripe's vision blurred. This was it. Then, a sound. Not a scream, not a growl, a roar. From the trees burst Kumbaya, a 400-pound silverback gorilla, fur silvered like moonlight on shotgun barrels. His fists pounded the earth. The python's head snapped toward him. Somewhere in the murk, 4 pairs of golden eyes flickered open. The swamp held its breath. Slither wasn't just a snake. He was old Blackwater's ghost, a creature that drowned fawns in their beds. His jaws yawned wide, needle fangs glistening, but Kumbaya moved faster. The gorilla's hands clamped around Slither's throat, thumbs pressing into the skull. The python hissed, a sound like steam escaping a grave. Stripe gasped, his lungs burning. Then, movement in the reeds. Brutus, the lion, mane tangled with burrs, one eye milky blind, emerged first. His brothers Titan, Rex, and Scar fanned out behind him. They didn't look at the zebra. They stared at Kumbaya. The gorilla's chest rose. Thump, thump, thump. A challenge.
Kumbaya's chest beat echoed like a war drum. Brutus answered with a roar that shook dew from the cattails. The lions circled, tails twitching. Slither, still tangled around Stripe, struck, fangs sinking into Kumbaya's forearm. The gorilla didn't flinch. He yanked, peeling the python backward like a rotten bandage. Stripe collapsed, wheezing. Then, a new sound, an engine. Ranger Dan's Jeep, paint peeling, bumper held by baling wire, plowed through the sawgrass. The lions hesitated. Kumbaya locked eyes with the ranger, a flicker of something human in the beast's gaze. Dan's hand hovered over the rifle, but the python was gone. Only a trail in the mud leading deep into the gator's domain. No one knew where Kumbaya came from. Some said he'd escaped a circus, others whispered he was old Blackwater's reckoning. But today, he was just a gorilla, alone, until he saw Stripe. Something in the zebra's wild eyes reminded him of what? The lions didn't matter, the python didn't matter. Kumbaya charged. Now, with Slither vanished and the jeep idling, Brutus licked his chops. The gorilla was bleeding, the zebra was broken. Easy meat, but Kumbaya stood his ground. Ranger Dan gripped the wheel. Should he shoot? Run? Then Stripe stirred. One hoof scraped dirt. The lion's ears pricked. The swamp waited.
Brutus lunged. Kumbaya swung. The lion's fangs grazed the gorilla's shoulder. Hot blood sprayed the ferns. Titan and Rex flanked left. Scar, the smallest, crept behind Stripe. Kumbaya roared, grabbing Brutus by the mane and heaving him into the mud. The lion yowled. Ranger Dan slammed the horn. The jeep's headlights lit the battle like a backwoods brawl. Slither, watching from the water, coiled tighter. Let them fight. Stripe tried to stand. His legs buckled. Scar's breath warmed his neck. Then a gunshot. Dan fired into the air. The lions froze. Kumbaya panted, clutching his wound. And in that heartbeat of silence, the python struck again. The gunshot's echo faded. Brutus shook mud from his mane, but his brothers didn't attack. They circled Kumbaya, not to kill, to test him. Scar's claws flexed near Stripe's throat, yet the zebra's glassy eyes held no fear, only exhaustion. Ranger Dan's fingers trembled on the rifle. Then, a guttural growl. Kumbaya, blood dripping down his silver fur, stepped between the lions and Stripe. Brutus snarled, but stepped back. Titan's tail twitched. Some ancient law of the wild hung in the air. The Jeep's engine sputtered. Dan exhaled. Was this a truce? Deep in the swamp, Slither's scales whispered through the reeds. He wasn't done yet.
Brutus locked eyes with Kumbaya. The gorilla's chest rose. Thump, thump, thump. A sound older than the swamp itself. Then, like shadows retreating at dawn, the lions melted into the undergrowth. All but Scar. The youngest lion lingered, his gaze fixed on Stripe. Not hunger, something worse. Recognition. Ranger Dan's breath hitched. Had these beasts met before? Kumbaya staggered, his wound seeping. Stripe's legs trembled as he tried to stand. And then, a splash. Slither's head breached the black water, jaws unhinged. He wasn't fleeing, he was hurting them. Dan's hand flew to the gear shift. Too late. Kumbaya's arm shook. Run? Gorillas don't run. But the python's bulk now blocked the shore. Scar crouched, tail lashing. Ranger Dan revved the engine. Tires spun in the muck. Stripe wheezed, his stripes pale with dust. Then Kumbaya did the unthinkable. He roared, scooped up Stripe with one arm and charged the water. Slither struck, fangs grazed fur, but the gorilla leaped, crashing into the shallows. Dan's Jeep fishtailed, horn blaring. The lions erupted into chaos. Brutus howled. Scar pounced, not at Kumbaya, but at Slither's thrashing tail. The python recoiled. For one heartbeat, the swamp was still. Then the murk swallowed them all.
Dan's boot slammed the brake. He knew these animals. Not their names, their souls. 10 years ago, a circus train had derailed near Blackwater. Lions, a gorilla, even a zebra vanished into the wild. He'd tracked them, sworn to protect them. Now, as Kumbaya fought the python, Dan saw the past replaying. His radio crackled. Back up? No time. He grabbed a rusted machete. Somewhere in the water, Stripe kicked. Slither's coils tightened. The gorilla's strength was fading. Dan waded in, blade raised. Not today, he muttered. Not again. Slither hissed, a sound like a train whistle in hell. Kumbaya's grip slipped. The python twisted, fangs aiming for Stripe's neck. Then, steel flashed. Dan's machete came down, not to kill, but to distract. The blade nicked scale. Slither reared back, hissing. Kumbaya seized the moment. With a final surge, he hurled Stripe onto shore. The zebra rolled, gasping. The gorilla turned, just as Slither's tail lashed like a whip. Dan went under. The water churned. Somewhere, Brutus roared. The last thing Kumbaya saw before the swamp dragged him down was Stripe's eyes, wide, alive, and full of grief. The water went still. No ripples, no thrashing. Just the slow drip of blood on cypress knees. Stripe staggered to the shore, his legs shaking. Ranger Dan's hat floated near the bank. Brutus and the lions vanished as if they'd never been there. Then, a bubble. Then, another. The black water boiled. Kumbaya erupted from the depths, Slither's body locked in his arms, the python's ribs cracking like wet kindling. The gorilla's fur was matted with mud and gore, his breaths ragged trumpets of survival. Stripe whinnied, a sound like a broken hymn. Somewhere in the trees, a lone crow screamed. The swamp exhaled. Stripe didn't run. He stared at Kumbaya, really stared. The gorilla's face was a battlefield of scars and fresh wounds. And in that moment, Stripe remembered. The circus trailer, the smell of hay and fear, the last nuzzle from his mother before men in boots dragged her away. Kumbaya had been there too, behind iron bars, watching. Ranger Dan surfaced, gasping, his machete gone. He saw the look between them. "Lord Almighty," he whispered. This wasn't just survival. This was a reckoning. Somewhere in the thicket, 4 pairs of eyes glowed. The lions were still watching, waiting.
Kumbaya dropped Slither's limp body. The python twitched, but the fight was gone. The gorilla turned to Stripe and did the impossible. He knelt. One massive hand touched the zebra's trembling flank. A gesture. A vow. Ranger Dan wiped swamp water from his eyes. This ain't natural, he thought, but it was beautiful. Then, a branch snapped. Brutus emerged, his muzzle streaked with old blood. Behind him, Scar licked his lips. Kumbaya rose, his roar shaking the cattails. This time, it wasn't defiance. It was a declaration. The lions flinched. For the first time in their hunted lives, they hesitated. Dan reached for his rifle. Empty. The standoff stretched. Then, a new sound. Distant. Mechanical. Helicopter blades. Brutus remembered the fire. The night the circus tents burned. He'd escaped with his brothers, but not before the screams of the big cats left behind. The guilt had festered. Now, facing Kumbaya, another captive who'd outlived his chains, the lion's snarl died in his throat. Scar growled, but Brutus swatted him silent. Ranger Dan saw it all, knew it. They're just like us, he muttered. The helicopter's thrum grew louder. Slither, half dead, slithered toward deeper water. Stripe passed against Kumbaya's leg. The gorilla's eyes never left Brutus. 2 kings, one scarred by men, the other by time. Then, a voice crackled over a megaphone. "This is the U.S. Wildlife Service. Stand down." Dan's stomach dropped. The government, the worst predator of all. Scar lunged, not at Kumbaya, but at the helicopter's spotlight. A gunshot rang out. The lion yowled, spinning into the reeds. Brutus erupted in fury, charging the jeep where Dan crouched. Kumbaya moved faster. The gorilla tackled Brutus mid-leap, the impact sending both beasts crashing into the mud. Stripe reared, hooves flashing. The helicopter banked hard, its spotlight jerking wildly. In the chaos, Sliver disappeared. Ranger Dan grabbed Scar's limp body, dragging him to cover. "Stop shooting!" he screamed at the sky. But the night was already unraveling, and in the shadows, Titan and Rex bared their fangs. The real battle was just beginning. The spotlight blinded them all. Kumbaya shielded Stripe with his body. Brutus blinked blood from his eyes. Then, the jeep's engine roared to life. Ranger Dan had hot-wired it, headlights flaring like twin suns. The lions scattered. The helicopter hovered, its door open. An agent in a khaki vest shouted, "We're here for the gorilla!" Dan's hands clenched the wheel, like hell. He gunned it, tires spewing mud, and rammed the jeep into the helicopter's landing skids. Metal shrieked. The aircraft lurched sideways. Kumbaya seized the moment. With Stripe at his side, he bolted for the tree line. Brutus watched them go, something like respect in his golden eyes. Then the lion vanished into the night, his brothers following. The last thing Dan saw before the helicopter righted itself was Scar's limp body in the grass, breathing, alive.
Slither watched from the shadows as the helicopter retreated. His ribs ached, his pride burned, but he understood survival. The gorilla had spared him, the lions had ignored him, the zebra. Stripe had looked at him without fear, just pity. The python hissed, sliding into the inky water. He'd returned to the deep, where the rules were simple. Eat, grow, forget. But tonight he'd remember. Ranger Dan slumped against the ruined jeep, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, Kumbaya and Stripe were running, together. The old man smiled. Maybe the swamp wasn't just a graveyard. Maybe it was a second chance. Dan found Scar's den at dawn. The young lion lay panting, his flanks stitched with buckshot. Brutus stood guard, his mane stiff with dried blood. The ranger knelt, medical kit in hand. Brutus growled. Dan didn't flinch. "I ain't dem," he said softly. The lion sniffed the air, then stepped aside. As Dan bandaged Scar, he saw the scars, the circus brand on the lion's hip, big top number 9. His hand shook. Kumbaya had one too. Stripe's mother had died in a cage. The ranger wept. Brutus nudged his shoulder. Not a threat, a truce. The helicopter was gone. The swamp was theirs again. But nothing would ever be the same.
10 miles north, Stripe collapsed. Kumbaya caught him, cradling the zebra like a foal. The gorilla rumbled, a sound like a lullaby. Stripe's breath hitched. He'd never known kindness before today, not from men, not from the wild. But this monster with gentle hands. Stripe nuzzled into Kumbaya's fur. The gorilla froze. Then, something wet fell onto the zebra's nose. Rain? No, tears. Kumbaya, the last of his kind, wept for a world that had never wept for him. The trees whispered. Somewhere, a lion roared. And for the first time in his life, Stripe slept without dreaming offenses. Brutus stood over Scar, watching the cub breathe. Ranger Dan slept by the fire, his face etched with grief. The lion licked his brother's wounds. He remembered the gorilla's eyes, the way Kumbaya had fought for the zebra, the way he'd spared Slither. Brutus had spent a lifetime ruling through fear. But tonight he'd seen something older, something truer. The helicopter would return. Men always did. But Brutus knew now, they weren't just beasts. They were survivors. Family. The lion lifted his head and roared, not a challenge, but a promise. Somewhere in the dark, Kumbaya heard it and understood.
The downpour came like judgment, cold, relentless. Kumbaya carried Stripe through the deluge, the zebra's breath shallow against his neck. Lightning split the sky. In that flash, the gorilla saw them, silhouettes on the ridge, Brutus and his brothers, watching. Not hunting, guarding. Ranger Dan's words echoed in Kumbaya's mind. They're just like us. The gorilla bared his teeth, not in threat, but acknowledgement. Then he pressed on, his bloody footprints washing away behind him. Somewhere ahead, the old circus grounds loomed, the place where chains had broken, where fire had freed them. Kumbaya's grip tightened. He would never go back. Stripe stirred, his hoof brushing the gorilla's scar, big top number 7. The rain couldn't wash that away. The lions followed, not as predators, as shadows. Brutus kept his distance, but his brothers fanned out, herding Kumbaya away from the highway's glow. Why? Stripe's eyes seemed to ask. Then, a scent. Diesel. Gun oil. Men. The gorilla froze. A truck idled beyond the tree line, its headlights off. Brutus bumped Kumbaya's shoulder, steering him south, toward the forgotten railroad tunnels. The gorilla hesitated. Lions, gorillas, zebras. None of this made sense, except it did. The oldest law, survive. Together. Kumbaya nodded. Brutus chuffed, almost a laugh. As they vanished into the tall grass, a radio crackled. Subject K7 spotted near sector... Static. Then silence.
The tunnel was damp and dark, stinking of coal and old iron. Stripe collapsed, his legs finally giving out. Kumbaya curled around him, blocking the draft. The zebra's tears were silent, just hot streaks on black fur. Outside, Brutus stood sentry. The lions had fought men before. They'd do it again. A train whistle wailed in the distance. Stripe flinched. Kumbaya hummed, a sound from another life when keepers would sing during storms. The zebra's breathing slowed. Somewhere above, helicopters crisscrossed the sky. But here underground, there was only this: a gorilla, a zebra, and the weight of being remembered. Brutus licked Scar's wounds by the tunnel mouth. The cub would live, but the old lion's gaze kept drifting to the circus brand on his own hip, big top number 1. The first captured, the first broken. He'd led his brothers with rage for years. Now, watching Kumbaya cradle that zebra, Brutus remembered the lioness, his mate, left behind in the fire. A growl built in his throat, not at the gorilla, at himself. The helicopters faded. Dawn bled through the trees. Brutus nudged Scar awake. It was time. The lions melted into the golden light, leaving Kumbaya to his strange new family. But as Brutus took his last look, he roared. Not a challenge, a farewell.
Ranger Dan stood knee-deep in black water, staring at the gutted Jeep. The feds had torn it apart, just like they'd tear apart his career. His radio buzzed. "Dan, they're issuing a shoot on sight for K7. The old man sank to his knees. The swamp dripped around him. A gator slid past, ignoring him. Even the snakes knew grief when they saw it. Dan fished out his badge, rusted after 20 years. He let it sink. Then he turned north, toward the railroad tunnels, toward the last wild things that remembered mercy. The water closed over his footprints as if he'd never been there at all. The tunnel walls wept condensation. Kumbaya peered at the rectangle Dan had pressed into his palm. A faded Polaroid, stripes of a different zebra, Stripe's mother, her eyes wide with fear behind bars. Behind her, a younger Kumbaya, his silver just coming in. And in the corner, Brutus as a cub, teeth bared at the camera. Dan's voice had been raw. "They'll say we imagined you." The gorilla tore the photo, swallowing the pieces. Stripe nosed his hand, confused. Kumbaya pulled him close. Outside, engines rumbled. Men shouted. But the gorilla smelled something else. Rain coming. The kind that erased trails. The kind that made ghosts. He touched the scar on Stripe's neck where a collar had been. No more brands, no more cages, just the run.
The gorilla moved at dusk, Stripe limping beside him. The helicopters were gone for now. The lions were wherever lions go. And the python? Slither would survive. They all would. But as Kumbaya breached the tree line, the old pain flared. His back, where the tranquilizer dart had nicked him yesterday. He'd hidden it from Stripe. The poison burned slow. Not enough to kill, just enough to make every step fire. The zebra nudged him, worried. Kumbaya grunted, pushing forward. Ahead, the river. Beyond it, deeper wilds, where men feared to go. The gorilla scooped Stripe onto his back and waded in. The current tugged, but his grip held. Halfway across, he let the photo scraps drift away. Some memories shouldn't be kept. Some debts were paid in silence. Old-timers at the Blackwater Tavern swear they've seen it. A silverback gorilla wading through the shallows, a zebra riding his shoulders. They say the lions walk beside him some nights, like guardians, that the python Slither watches from the reeds, letting them pass. Ranger Dan? Gone. But his journal turned up at the sheriff's office, one entry circled in red. They ain't monsters. They're what's left when we're done breaking things. The feds closed the case. The circus denied everything. And the swamp? The swamp keeps its secrets. Every now and then, when the moon's right, you'll hear it. A roar that ain't quite lion, ain't quite gorilla. A sound old as these hills. A sound that means run.
Stripe grazes in a meadow no map names. His limp's gone. His scars have faded. And when the nightmares come, the men, the cages, Kumbaya is there, a wall of warmth against his back. Some nights, Brutus visits, bringing meat they don't eat but accept. Some nights, Slither coils nearby, his presence a truce. And on the clearest nights, when the wind carries diesel and gunfire, the gorilla stands, sniffing the air. Stripe presses close. Kumbaya rumbles, low and sure. Not this time. The zebra believes him. They amble deeper into the trees, where the stars don't have names.
where no one will ever put a number on them again. Turn off your flashlight. Listen. Beyond the crickets, past the rustle of hunting owls. There, a snap of branches too thick for deer, a grunt too deep for bear. The rangers don't search anymore. The tourists don't believe. But you know. Somewhere in the unmapped dark, Kumbaya watches. His silver fur gleams in moonlit patches. His hands, scarred, gentle, test the wind. He's learned the shape of helicopters, the smell of rifles. He's learned how to vanish. And if you stand very still, if you don't breathe, you might hear it. The softest thump. 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 Like a heartbeat. Like a promise.